and you're listening to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
For those who don't know, now you know, baby. This is Hot Rod Biggs, Jared, Jimmy Street. We're going to take them to the limit one more time, baby, right here on Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome one more time to the Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling podcast. And today, as always, my brother from the same father and mother.
And Dan.
No.
Sorry.
Jared, the Plastic Sheik Street. And you've already introduced yourself there by, calling yourself somebody else. So what's up? How are you doing?
I'm good, brother. How about yourself?
I'm great, but I'm sure you're a little better than great. But tell everybody where you just got back from.
I just got back from Hawaii, or as the natives call it, Hawaii. So
Hawaii.
It's more of a V sound. So it's I found that out on the trip. So.
Yeah, brother, welcome to Hawaii.
Yeah. It's we saw a lot of the islands, and it's a beautiful place. It's the time difference is kind of a killer though, man. It's 6 hours from East Coast time. It's so I find myself trying to adjust to that, but slow process.
No joke, because Michelle and I got to go there on our honeymoon, and we were waking up at 4 a.m. and going to bed at 8, and it was just weird,
Yeah.
But beautiful, beautiful place, beautiful state,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Just gorgeous.
I highly recommend it to anybody.
Absolutely. If you can deal with the plane trip, you can go.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, it's good to have you back. Of course, no one noticed. None of our listeners noticed because it's just been the normal 2 weeks since our last show. But this week we've got a really cool one, and this guy is kind of like everybody that I talk to when it comes to the wrestlers. They were like, you got to get this guy on. You got to get this guy on. So he's kind of one of those guys that's like your favorite wrestler's wrestler, and it's pretty cool when you know that somebody is so well respected, and so everybody wants to hear their story. So obviously that makes us want to have them on the show. Now, the good news is I got to know Rick a little bit in Nashville, and Rick's a straight up dude. That's all I can say. He's just a straight up, just real good guy. And we're just happy to have him on the show today. He is Rick Reynolds, aka Damien, aka Forsaken, aka Medic, whatever you want to call him. But the man has done a lot and done a lot of stuff, and honestly, just from the little bit that I know about him, I'm just excited to get to know him even more today on our show, man. Yeah, man, he's the things you mentioned, it shows he has a lot of respect from other wrestlers, and man, that means a lot. Like you look at somebody like we've talked to a lot of people that have a lot of respect for people like Bobby Eaton and something like that. And when somebody is well revered like that, they're a solid dude, and that's going to be a good interview. That I'm looking forward to getting more information out of Rick and finding out all about his career. Yeah, well, there's some interesting tidbits that we've been cued in to ask by our sources that we will never name. Thanks, sources. Snitches get stitches. Yeah, snitches get stitches. Wait, or would that make us the snitches about the stitches? I don't know. Snitches? I don't. Anyway, I have my resources. Sometimes if the internet doesn't tell you everything, you got to go a little bit higher up the knowledge tree. You know what I'm saying? So good news is I know a lot of guys that know a lot of cool stuff. So anyway, like I said, the sources will never be named, but we thank you, sources. You know who you are. Anyway, well, I tell you what, why don't we just go ahead and get the show started with Mr. Rick Reynolds? What do you say about that? That sounds great, man. All right, we'll be right back with Rick Reynolds, a.k.a. Forsaken, on the Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling podcast after these messages.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Are your business expenses playing hide and seek? With Uber for Business, the small spends that slip through the cracks, like rides and meals, go right where you need them. Because it integrates with leading expense platforms, you can say goodbye to surprise costs, missing dollars, or chasing receipts. Everything's track downable. Uber for Business. Make small steps that make a big impact. Learn more at uber.com/small steps.
Walmart Business saves you time, money, and hassle, which means you can focus on what really matters. Like putting the money you save back into what you do. Spending more time training your team, filling orders, and finding new clients. Anything and everything, right down to, oh, that's one, choosing the best hold music. Walmart Business. It's the Walmart you love, now for your business. Learn more at business.walmart.com.
Jif peanut butter. It's that jiffing good, it doesn't really need advertising. So instead, enjoy the calming sounds of the ocean.
Jif. Ooh, it's that jiffing good. Get your Jif at jif.com.
This is Kroll, and you're listening to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling with Jimmy Street and Jared the Plastic Sheik. Be sure to like, subscribe, and view all of our USWO and Saw Wrestling content at Nashville Wrestling Network, exclusively on YouTube.
What you doing, Jimmy Street?
How you doing, man?
Man, let me get up here and get off the road here in a minute.
Okay.
I started rolling on up, trying to save. I still got about 4 hours before I get home.
Shoot.
Left out at 9 this morning. I own a expediting little company, trucking company.
Yeah.
And once a year, for about 2 months, we deliver yearbooks everywhere.
Huh.
And for Johnston, and I did the very first one, and this is the very last one. I had to take 2 stops, at one in Dover, Tennessee, and then drive one down to Houston. So I'm coming back from that.
That's pretty cool, man. How did you get into that?
Tommy Hicks.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I was a police officer for a lot of years.
I thought I remembered that. Yeah.
Yeah. I did that total of 21 years. And matter of fact, I wrestled and I worked narcotics.
Yeah.
And so I worked under a hood, and then I would leave out and go work. and Jamie Dundee one time was at the fairgrounds, and Wolfie and Jamie was, and I'm sitting there talking to him, and Jamie hollered, "He's a narc!" And I said, "Jamie, shut up! Hey, look at everybody, narc!"
Oh my God!
Shut up! I know. Shut up!
That's just, you. I'm just blown away that you were a narcotics officer and you actually were around Jamie Dundee.
I was just a police officer when I started wrestling.
Okay.
And I went with Gypsy. I went to talk to Gypsy, and literally, here I'm a cop, and Joey Rossi took me into his house, and there was pot smoke so thick you could cut it with a knife. It was so thick. Walking in here, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah. That is a fine line to cross right there. It's like, I really like this wrestling.
I'm telling you, nobody ever really done it around me. Just about everybody knew who I was and respected that. And, I didn't go in on their stuff. They didn't come in on mine. So. Sure.
But I mean, the remnants are hard to hide on marijuana. Let's just be honest, so.
Absolutely it is. And, but one of the things I've found is that I think 98% of the people I know smizzes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know too many people. I don't, but
right.
There's just about everybody I know.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we're glad you're here. So let me go ahead and kick us in here because I feel like we'll get into other conversations and we'll just record that. All right, we are back with more from Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling. And today, y'all, I'm very excited, Jared. And I've been talking about him in the earlier part of the show here. But this man right now is a giant in the business. He's one of the guys that honestly was a locker room leader. He was one of the guys that you could go to and ask him how to do a match. And he was a big man, but he understood wrestling. He understood all the intricacies of doing storylines. And he also just understood that old thing called psychology. But the cool thing I like about him is he's not only a pro wrestler, he's a former police officer, he's a minister, and he's on the show today. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is Mr. Rick Reynolds, a.k.a. Forsaken, a.k.a. whatever you want to call him. Just don't call him anything bad. Won't end up well for you. But Rick, welcome to the show, brother. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're so nice, Jimmy. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome, brother. And hey, man, I've been wanting to have you on one of my podcasts. And since the other one dropped the ball, I'm going to take the ball.
Good. I'm glad you did.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right. So we always start off with the main question, the number one question, and that one always goes to the Plastic Sheik himself, Jared Street, my own brother, flesh and blood. Jared, take it away.
All right, Rick. So this is a question I like to ask. I didn't come up with it, but we'll act like I did. But this kind of lets people know your influences in wrestling and your favorite people in wrestling. If you had like 4 or 5, like a Mount Rushmore of wrestlers of all time, your favorite, what would that be?
You know, I listened to your podcast also, so I knew this was coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The very first one on my list would be the Mongolian Stomper.
Oh,
and
nice.
The reason it would be the Mongolian Stomper was when I was a kid, I used to have dreams. I grew up in East Tennessee, and I had dreams about wrestling the Mongolian Stomper. And I got to see him several times live, never met the man, always wanted to work once I got into business, but never had the opportunity. But my very first one would be the Mongolian Stomper.
That's awesome.
My second one would be Ronnie Garvin.
Oh,
and
love it.
I went and watched him and Boris Malenko. They had a feud in Knoxville territory.
Yes.
And I watched them, and I absolutely loved. I drove different towns just to watch that feud of Ronnie Garvin, and I got to meet Ronnie Garvin at the Gulf Coast Wrestlers Reunion down in Mobile, Alabama, and he and I got to talk about the feud, and so I have ultimate respect for Ronnie Garvin. I think my third would be Nikita Koloff.
Okay.
Oh,
Nikita and I, a few years ago, got to spend a lot of time together, and I actually got to take the Russian sickle a few times.
Oh.
And we traveled a lot, and we talked Jesus, and he's a minister now also, and to hear his stories, and just to talk with him and spend time with him, it helped me grow as a man, and my walk with God. He was really strong and influential in that.
That's
and
awesome.
I was thinking about my last one, and I started going through it, that there's several people that I was going to put in there. I was thinking about Shane Morton, and I love Shane Morton, and we've been, friends for 30 years. And I go through, and of all the great guys, I've had something to do with their life or them with me, and I wanted to put them in. And I thought about it hard and long. There's a lot of great wrestlers I've wrestled that I think is just good as anybody out there. Scott Spade up in Chicago, Rough Crossing, those guys. Eric Freedom out of Michigan. He and I had great matches together. And I've decided to put in the fourth spot was somebody that allowed me to love wrestling again. Because at one point in my life, and we'll get into it, is that I was going to step away. Yeah. And his name is Jimmy Blaze, and he's the owner of Powell Entertainment out of Chicago.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I noticed him on your list quite a bit of work guys you've worked. So, I did a little research myself, and that's a cool name. I like that. We'll check him out for sure. Listeners, go check out Jimmy Blaze. That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great list,
Thank you
Rick.
so much.
Yeah, very original too, because there's 2 Canadians, a Minnesota Russian, and an indie guy. You gotta love that. Yeah. Yeah.
When Nikita and we were in Tampa, and we were sitting at this restaurant talking, and I asked him, I said, why did you change your name? He said, for the gimmick. Yeah. He changed his whole personality, everything for the gimmick. That's commitment to wrestling right there, baby.
Yeah, and he gets a lot of flack from some of the guys who make fun of him for using the accent. But do you remember when I was doing the Omar Al-Kazan gimmick? Do you remember that, Rick?
Think so.
Yeah, because I think I'd already ended that. And as much as Shane wanted me to do it down in Columbia when you and I and everybody worked together, I was actually happy to kind of be away from it because it allowed me to be myself. But long story short, I was doing this kind of Middle Eastern oil tycoon character, and I found myself doing the accent too. I almost feel like it was a way for him to maintain, to not let up on it, and that's the way I've always seen why he probably stuck with the accent sometimes when maybe it wasn't necessary, but
he lived the character.
Yeah. Well, he's a great guy. He really is. I got to work with him. Well, he was on a show and he did a little, devotional during the middle of the show there. And he gave his testimony, and Nikita was really cool. He actually was very cool, took a picture with us and just kind of great stuff like that. But just talked to him a little bit, and he prayed for us before the show. It was really cool, man. Very nice man. Very nice man.
Good man.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we're here to talk Rick Reynolds today. So we'll talk Nikita when he comes on. So, Rick, tell me a little bit about you growing up here, brother. Where were you born and where'd you go to high school?
I was born in a little small town up in East Tennessee called Sunbright.
Okay.
I had a graduating class of about 40 people. It's up in Morgan County. Okay. And it was, like I said, it was just a little small town. I left there. I went to college at Rome State. I went there to play basketball, and I had a terrible attitude and everything. And as a matter of fact, I still can do the same things I did when I played there. Sit down and watch back and forth the ball go up and down. And so that's all I did. And so I didn't last long there. I quit because, like I said, I had a bad attitude, and I thought it was the coach, but it was all me. Yeah. And so left there, and then moved to Nashville, and I started working the prison down in Nashville.
Okay. Yeah.
That was my very first, full-time job, was the prison.
Now, you're saying basketball. So obviously in high school, did you play basketball? Did you also play football? What did you play in those days?
I played football until freshman year, and this was I got cut from my basketball team, and I was furious that I got cut. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I've got a picture and where they took a picture of me, and I had an old suit on, uniform on, and I looked like I was beat to death. I was determined that because I was one of the tallest players. I'm 6'5" now. Yeah. And so, I was determined I was going to get better. And one summer, I had my dad put me a goal up, and we made a backboard, and he put it up on a telephone pole, and I played basketball 8 hours a day. I mean, I played and played and played, and the next year I made the team, made the junior varsity, and as a junior I was starting, and I had a pretty good career there at Sunbright, but it's a small school, so It's that I went on to Roan State, and I didn't do well at all there, and so I left and went into the workforce.
Yeah, I understand that one for sure. So, okay, now we know you not only as all these other things, but as an awesome wrestler, and we're going to get into all that, but the start of it really is, when did you start liking wrestling?
Oh, as a kid, I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and I would watch out of the Knoxville channel, watched Robert Fuller and all that, and I watched Nick Goulas wrestling, and I just absolutely loved it. My grandparents would watch Nick Goulas, and I used to watch, Tojo Yamamoto and Gypsy and all the one, Lynn Rossi.
Yeah.
And Lynn was actually, him and Joey was instrumental about me getting into wrestling.
Yeah.
Actually.
Tell us a little bit about that. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your start in wrestling.
Yeah.
So I was a police officer in Williamson County, and Lynn Rossi had a health food store in Brentwood.
The one Tommy Hagee told us about?
Probably. Matter of fact, they had a picture of Tommy and Joey, a big oil painting when they tag teamed up on the wall.
Yeah.
And so I knew who Tommy was, but I never met Tommy at this time. And I used to go in there, and things were different back then. Not anybody could get into wrestling.
Right.
And I would go every day, and I would go talk to Lynn. And we became friends, and I tried to get him to tell me something about wrestling. I tried to get him to train me. I tried to, and he just wouldn't do it. I mean, he wouldn't smart me up. He wouldn't put me with somebody. He never did. We talked about everything, but when it got to that, he cut me off. Yeah. And Joey Rossi, his son, one day, I was talking with him, and this is after months of me talking to him. And he told me, he says, Rick, he said, do you really want to get into wrestling? I said, I want to do that more than I ever want to do anything else. And he said, well, if you're serious, you be here at the shop at 6 o'clock. At 5:45, I was sitting in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Joey came out and unlocked the door and looked at me. Came out like, he said, are you sure? He said, I want to tell you before you get in it. He said, you're going to see all kinds of people and see all kinds of things. And you're going to have to separate your life from wrestling and your private life. And I said, I'm willing to do that. And that's when he took me over to Gypsy Joe's house over in off of Nolensville Pike. And I met Joe for the first time.
Yeah. Now that's awesome. So let me ask you real quick here. Now, Gypsy Joe had a reputation, obviously, about him of one of the toughest, guys ever in the business whatsoever. How did that translate into your meeting him and continuing on with him?
Joe, he liked the smiz. And so, I walked in and it was just, I was like, oh no. And so he looked at me and he talked to me for a minute, and he told me, he says, Thursday, you be here. And it's off of West End. And I was there, and we got in and talked, and he got me in the ring, and he says, okay, I train you. And I can tell you, the Gypsy Joe where I trained is not like the Gypsy Joes some other guys down the road. Joe worked us, and I can't tell you a hold that I didn't have to do to his perfection. One day, they put me in an arm bar in the back, and I had to grab the back of the head and flip over the guy and land on my feet. And I did that one whole day until I landed on my feet like I was supposed to. I was falling on my head, and he cussed me and get up, do it again. And I did it again. I never gave up, and he wouldn't let me give up. Yeah. But he taught me every hold that you could ever see. I did that hold during training.
Yeah. Now, who were you training with in the ring? Because just not to knock on Gypsy, I think the world of Gypsy, and again, I respect his abilities and everything like that. But you're probably a good foot taller than him.
Oh yeah, at least. Yeah, that didn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. But who were you working in the ring with him?
See, Cool Breeze Williams just finished up when I started. There was a guy, and I was coming in at the time, and I can't remember the name of the promotion that was down in Nashville, but Dr. Squash was running as UWF or something like that. And Max Payne was down there, and a guy named Barry Cootie and Gentleman Jim Corbin, and but anyway, that was the group that was running Nashville, and Gypsy was there with them. And so there was a guy, like I said, Breeze just finished. I come in, and I had a friend of mine wanted to train. He was my same size, and so Joe was training him and me both, and we were going in as the medics with him, going against, I can't think of his name, is Bubba Perry, and Street was his last name, his partner.
Yeah.
They were the interns.
Okay.
So they was turning them babyface, going to bring us in as the heel team, and they're a veteran team, so we was green as grass, so they could carry us through a program. So that was the plan. Yeah. And so there was a guy from Manchester, a little small guy, muscled up. He was training there with me. He started about the same time, and a guy named Luscious Leslie Love, and he was in mid-training. He was working matches, but he was still training, and I was happy always to see him there because Gypsy normally cussed him out instead of me. So.
That's awesome.
Let me tell you one story about Joe, then we'll move on.
Please.
I was training, and I couldn't throw a drop kick and Gypsy started cussing me, and he told me, he says, "You kicked me right here in the head. You kicked me. And he cussed me. So I jumped up and I kicked the dog out of Joe. I hit him so hard his ear was bleeding, knocked him up against the rope, and he rolled out. His ear was bleeding, and he was cussing me, and he started to reach up underneath and he brought out a big 2x4. And he got in there, and I told my buddy, I said, if he just tried to hit me with that 2x4, I said, I'm fighting him.
Right.
And he got that 2x4. He looked at me and raised that 2x4. He says, "Oh, you stiff SOB. Now you kick this 2x4. I had to spend the rest of the time doing drop kicks on that 2x4.
That's oh man.
Oh, Joe.
God bless Joe. Yeah, God bless Joe.
So do you consider that like your first match, or what's your first match?
My first match was in Hartsville, Tennessee, and I don't remember the guy running, but Joe called, and me and my partner Sam, we went to Hartsville, and that was our very first match against a guy named Tommy Vito. And Tommy had been around for a while, and another guy named Joey Jarrett was our very first match in Hartsville, Tennessee.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Learning through play starts with Lego Duplo. With Lego Duplo, toddlers can develop real-life skills while having fun with colorful bricks made just for them. Large, easy to grip, and safe to explore. When children express themselves with Lego Duplo, they build patience, problem-solving, and empathy. See your child learn perseverance and self-expression with everything they imagine and create. Visit lego.com/preschool to learn more.
If you went on a road trip and you didn't stop for a Big Mac or drop a crispy fry between the car seats or use your McDonald's bag as a placemat, then that wasn't a road trip. It was just a really long drive. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating McDonald's.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling, the podcast that's based on the old school but can still help you find the good stuff from today. Jimmy Street and the Plastic Sheik, Jared, are the undisputed tag team champions of the wrestling podcast world. From thought-provoking topics to superstar interviews to action figure expertise. This team does it all. And all they ask is, give me back my pro wrestling! Every other Thursday, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Who says you can't be the topic of conversation for all the right reasons? The Hyundai Tucson Hybrid pairs bold presence with advanced technology and sleek style. It's everything you didn't know you needed in an SUV and then some. Okay, Hyundai. Visit HyundaiUSA.com to learn more.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
Okay, so we're kind of dancing around a little bit here about the topic, but when do you remember basically getting your first encounter with my co-host and partner in podcasting, live and in color with good old-fashioned PG-13 Wolfie D? When do you remember seeing him first?
Pete, his stepdad, I worked for Pete once I left the prison system. I worked for Pete as security over the hospital in Williamson County. Yeah. And I actually moved into the apartment complex down in Nashville where Pete was living.
Yeah,
so
okay.
Pete and I became good friends, and Camille, and so we spent a lot of time together. And then Warren, he was just a child. He was, I guess he was 7 or 8 years old, maybe 9.
Okay.
And he was still, and I used to sit there with him actually, and he'd show me wrestling moves. He had these wrestling, and he'd have all these, he's always been creative, and he would take it and do these wrestling moves and show me all these wrestling moves.
That's
but
funny.
That was the first time I met Warren.
So now was this in the world famous LA part of Nashville?
Yes, it was. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now tell Jared what LA stands for.
Lower Antioch.
Yeah. Now, if you've ever heard a promo from a very famous, actually, Jared, who's my favorite pro wrestler of all time?
Ric Flair?
Maybe the other Rick.
Oh, Ricky Morton. Yeah, Ricky Morton.
I'm sorry. Well, Rick Reynolds, too. I love Rick, too. But Ricky Morton's probably my favorite wrestler of all time. And I always heard Ricky Morton say it in random promos that he was from Lower Antioch, too. So, that's pretty funny. Yeah. So when it gets down to it, though, Wolfie talks about around 13, 14, 15 years old is when he was sneaking his way into the ring. Do you remember first working with him?
Yes. Yeah, I do. Actually, Camille, his mom came to me, and I'd been working probably 7, 8, 9 months, thereabouts. And she came to me, and Warren has always loved wrestling. And she asked me if I would train him. And Pete talked to me about doing it, and so I agreed to get him in the ring and start working with him.
Yeah.
But, he was a natural, I'll tell you, because he's always watched wrestling. So, if you told him to do something, he already knew the basic moves, and that's more than what most people can do now. You tell somebody to do a top wrist lock, and they don't even know how. Warren was a natural. He already knew how to do all this stuff.
Yeah. And he was easy. Yeah, and he was an athlete, and it was probably simple for him to come into now. But Gypsy Joe maybe had a little issue with it. Is that right, Gypsy?
Gypsy cussed me. I know of 3 good cussings he gave me for that because one of them was because where we trained at was over in West Nashville, and it was a little garage that had a ring in it, and it had about 3 layers of carpet on it, and the boards was rotten, and it smelled like cat pee, and it was, but that's where we trained, and so the very first time I went in there, and I didn't ask Gypsy to go up there, and I guess the guy that owned the garage called, and Gypsy came up there, and he cussed me. Lord, I thought he was going to fight me that day.
Oh, man. Okay, well, so tell me a little bit about some of the promotions you were working for, because I ultimately want to get to talking about, one of my favorite tag teams, one of the best tag teams of all time, in my opinion, Dante and the Great Mephisto. I want to get to that, where you start working with them, but kind of lead us up to that process, if you don't mind.
I started out as the medic, and like I said, we originally was going to go in to Dr. Squash's thing, and then that folded, and so we didn't do much with them. And then I just started working little outlaw shows here and there, trying to get my name out. And we went and met Dutch Mantel, and we went to Memphis, and we worked the Blackbirds down on Memphis TV, and so the funny thing, that's the first time I ever did TV, and was both nervous. Very first time I met Jamie Dundee, and Jamie was like 15 years old.
Yeah.
And he wasn't no different then than he was now. I love Jamie, by the way. Yeah. Some of the best times.
Yeah.
Rick Reynolds, so the very first thing he told my boy, he said, if I was you, I'd take that gum out of your mouth before you get out there. He said, somebody smack it out. This little guy saying it, And so we went out there, and Sam wasn't as well-versed in wrestling as I was. And I'm still far from being good, but they got in there. They were supposed to take the finish on me. I told them I'd take it. And we was working Brick House and Iceman King Parson. Oh, and man. King Parson gave Sam a DDT, and Sam fell on King Parson's shoulder, and they like to beat the dog out of Sam. They threw me out of the ring and beat the dog out of Sam. And Brickhouse come off top rope. He didn't catch himself at all. I mean, he landed flat on Sam and pinned him. And Sam quit right after that. And,
wow.
That was his last. But I continued going, and then I worked down in Tullahoma, Winchester. Then I got into Columbia, and I started working as the medic down in Columbia for a lot. And you got to keep in mind, I was still working, a few nights a week, and plus I went into being a police officer, and I was still working full time there, and I'd have to wear a mask to go work these other places, and I'd go back to work, and be a police officer after been wrestling. Yeah. And so I did the medic gimmick, and then when Cool Breeze Williams was the Great Mephisto, and with Tommy, and I'd been working with Pete because I was a pretty good sized guy, and Pete, I could stand behind him and you couldn't see me. Right. So, and there wasn't too many other guys that size, so me and Pete were married for about 4 years together. Yeah. And then Cool Breeze quit wrestling, and they asked me to be the next part of the Devil's Disciples. And so when he left, I went in as Damien. So it was Damien and Dante, and we ran, I guess, 12 years or so. Tommy and I did, and we ran, did NWA. We worked Music City. I did all the stuff around, and then it was a good run with Tommy. Sure was.
Because, people don't understand this too, is that honestly, because there was Memphis and the Memphis territory, which had, the Louisville, Nashville, Evansville, all the other shows. But then you also in Jonesboro, those kinds of things. But then you also had this offshoot of kind of like the Middle Tennessee outlaw scene where honestly that was like its own territory where a lot of the USWA guys would come in and work on their one night off or 2 nights off. They would sometimes have a night off, and they would come in and work, and basically you guys were working 5-6 nights a week, but then so you're working very similar to what the USWA guys are working. Instead though, you're kind of doing all the other kind of ancillary towns that sometimes they would come visit, so you would run into a lot of people, I'm sure, during that time.
Absolutely. Terry Rice ran Power Pro, and at one time Terry Rice had it going on, and Pete was booking for him, and that was the very first time I met New Jack. He was with Junkyard Dog.
Wow.
And they came over to Terry Rice's show. Was running Woodbury, and we was packing that place out.
Yeah.
And literally packing it out. I think that was the most heat I ever got as a single wrestler was there, and I was Santa Claus. And Pete was the big baby face, and I come in and was throwing candy and everything to everybody, and I reached out and said, I got something special for you. And I reached over and had a brick in the thing. He reached down to get his present, and I cracked him over the head, and he juiced, and then I reached over and pulled the medic hood down over, and man, I got beat to death before I got back in dressing up.
Yeah. So real quick before we get off of Pete, I know we're going to bring him up a little bit later in the show too, but when it comes to Pete, I've heard that when he put a chop on you, that he could actually touch your shoulders with his fingertips. Is that? Oh yeah.
Yeah. He was huge. Pete was huge. But you know who had the hardest chop besides Joe was Cool Breeze Williams.
Yeah.
Cool Breeze chopped me one time and popped my backbone.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
We were down in we're in Columbia, and Breezy would always talk to you in the ring. Hey there, buddy. How you doing there? And he went and he said, "Here's a little chop," and he killed me, and I can take a chop.
Sure.
But he hits me, boom, and my back popped. And I said, "Oh, Breeze." I said, "Just leave me alone for a minute." He went, "That was a good one, wasn't it, buddy?" and I'm laying there just dying. Joe. I mean, he was tough.
Yeah. That's amazing.
The pine knot.
Yeah.
So I always like to ask this. I asked the previous Devil's Disciples interview we had. I asked them this question: how was it working under a mask, under the hood?
You know what? I worked under the hood for so long. It wasn't no issue for me, because from the time I started until I started the Forsaken character, I was always under a hood, and so once you get used to it, it's not bad. If I had to go back now, it would be a different story.
Yeah, because Arvil would say stuff like the peripheral vision sometimes is off. You have to get used to that and stuff like that. But
choke your wind and stuff like that.
Yeah, choke your wind. Yeah. So give us a little bit quick rundown of the gimmicks up until this point. So you're the intern. You did the medic.
I did the medic, and then I went into a Damien. I only had 2 at that time. Yeah.
Okay, 2 at that time. And then also you are protecting and serving. Now, what was the police force you were working for at this point?
I worked at the Williamson County Sheriff's Department, and then I worked at Brentwood.
Okay.
And then from there, when I started doing the Damien character, is when I got in and I was working narcotics also.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Man, that's got to be a crazy job there. I know this isn't Give Me Back My Police Department, but working pro wrestling or the narcotics, which was the tougher one?
Probably the pro wrestling. It actually saved my life one time.
Oh, wow.
I took off to go wrestle, and then I was going to come back, and my partner that was with me, they were going to Clarksville, and a drunk driver hit him and killed the drunk driver and hurt my partner. But I would have been in the car with him if I hadn't went to go wrestle.
Holy cow. So we've elicited some responses from some of your peers and some of my old buddies, and so we've had some questions kind of come up, and it's more about stuff that they want to hear you talk about. So one of the things, and again, if the timing is off, that's okay because we just bounce all over the place anyway. Even though we're trying to tell a little bit of a story along a line here, chronologically speaking. But Shane gave me a funny story that saying the Harding Mall when the ring broke with Dante and the Mortons. What was this much later, or was this around this time? Or
no, this is when me and Tommy was working together, and Terry Rice ran a show at the Harding Mall, and it was a good show. And the very first match, Pete Cannon dropped a leg, and the whole ring hit the floor. Boom! Yeah. Very first match. And so they tacked it up a little bit, tried to, and they ran another match, and it broke. And Terry come to us and said, "Guys, you got to save us." So we just did a big brawl. And at that time, I was pretty heavy in martial arts for several years, and it was hard for me to throw working kicks.
I bet.
Because but anyway, and so Shane Dante had Shane and had him hooked, and he said, "Hey, Ricky, kick him." I said, "Okay." And the guy, one of the marks over there, said something about it being fake. I said, "Fake?" And one of the things about me is that you hear a lot of stories. People can say whatever they wanted to about wrestling, it being fake, but I never wanted them to think I was fake.
Sure.
I always wanted them to know they couldn't beat me up. No matter what they thought, I was the guy that they couldn't beat up. So I went and I kicked Shane, and I kicked him right. I almost knocked Tommy out. I kicked him so hard. Kicked Shane in the mouth, and his head went back, and it hit Tommy. And so I turned around, did my thing, come back, grab Shane, and he's bleeding out of his mouth, busted his lip, cut it. I said, "What's wrong with you?" And he said, "You did it, you." I said, "Oh, man, I'm so sorry." I laid him open. Sure.
Wow.
So you're talking about martial arts there a little bit. Tell us a little something about going with Wolfie to a karate tournament.
I know he went with me to a couple of them. I did pretty well. Normally, I was in it for a lot of years. I did Ishinru, which is an Okinawan style, and we used to do MMA before MMA was cool.
Yeah.
We did grappling, ground techniques, joint manipulation, all the good stuff, knees, elbows. And so he went with me one time. At one time in the middle, they had different rankings, and I was fifth in the Southeast ranking. And Wolfie went with me, and I don't think anybody ever got anything on me. And he was like, "Oh, man, that's so cool." I just loved it. I didn't get beat.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Your gut affects everything, even your mood. So Ollie created 2 brand new products to take care of your insides. Ollie Big 10 Probiotic has 10 strains of probiotics, their most ever, to support a healthy gut microbiome, immune system, and stress response. And Ollie Super Good Superfoods delivers 15 superfoods in tasty gummy form. Find them at ollie.com and exclusively at Walmart.
Ollie!
These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Everyone who works at Starbucks, full or part-time, gets stock in our company, simply for being part of our company. That's why we call our employees partners, because when Starbucks succeeds, our people do too. And that success turns into down payments, family vacations, and so much more. At Starbucks, benefits like company stock are just the start. Learn more about how we support partners at starbucks.com/partners.
Are you a pro wrestling fan? Well, stop by Captain's Corner, where you can get autographed photos, cards, magazines, and figures from all of your favorite wrestling superstars of the past, present, and future. You'll also be able to participate in live signings in the weeks and months to come. Make sure to stop by Captain's Corner on Facebook and give us a holler. Remember, cheers to the working man.
Okay, well, another one of my favorite people, and I just had him on the podcast with Wolfie D, is Ben Jordan. And of course, we love the Wild Boys, Ben Jordan, Steve Neely, great tag team. Honestly, at the end of the episode, we were trying to get them to say the Mount Rushmore of Tennessee tag teams, and they kind of went Memphis with it, and I respect that. That's what they like growing up. But what I was wanting to hear was like the Devils, the Wild Boys, the Mortons, and the Scott brothers. That's kind of what I was expecting to hear, and I kind of wanted to hear that. But so obviously Ben now is a good friend of mine, and yeah, he brought up a question that I have to ask you, and he really wanted it to kind of elicit a response from you as well, where it's these trips to Evansville with Ashley Hudson and Ben Jordan, and then there was apparently a snowstorm and a cigar and a locker. You locked your keys in the car. So go ahead. I'm gonna let you talk.
So we were leaving out to go to Evansville to work, and I think it was either Ben or Ashley, one of the two, that called the guy and said, "Listen, it's supposed to get bad up there." And he said, "Oh no, we're having wrestling. Come on." I said,
"Yeah,
okay, here we go." So we're going up, and we hit the Penny Ryle going up, and by I think it was Madisonville or something like that. A mate was driving. And, he's from Australia, so they don't have a lot of snow up there, or down there, I should say. And all at once he hit, and we went around and around, went through the medium, and ended up in the medium facing the other way. And I said, "Kick it, Ashley," and he went and kicked it. And finally, we got us out, and we went around to the side and finally got out of that and drove to Evansville, and when we got there, guess what? No wrestling. They had canceled it.
Of course.
And I don't remember him locking the keys in the car.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me, but I don't remember it. And
was there something about a celebratory cigar after?
Ashley and I, on the way back from a successful night of wrestling, we normally had a good cigar, and I used to. I haven't done it probably 20 years.
Yeah.
I would get Cuban cigars.
Yeah.
And we'd always smoke high-dollar Cuban cigars.
Hey, nothing says class. Yeah, that's classy.
We'd have a glass of port and Sherwood and a cigar on the way back.
Man. Well, we're going to bring up Ashley in a little bit. I don't want to talk too much about him. We've got a little thing at the end. We play the name game, and I want you to talk more about him. But so I just, a couple other things that I've heard about that I've got to ask you about. And again, if my timing is off on some of these, but I would love to hear about the year-long feud with Shane Morton.
Shane and I, we worked. I bet I've worked Shane 300 times.
Yeah.
Through tag teams and all that. But he and I, we've worked down in Columbia just constant. And I think that one of the funniest stories with me and Shane, I was doing a thing with a snake, and I was scared to death of a snake. And Charmin Charles was my manager back then. And Charles always played with snakes. And I had to go over to his house, and he had to educate me on snakes and the snake I had, because I was so scared to hold it. And but we did the finish where I reached into the bag and pulled out a snake and then put it over Shane's head, the bag with the snake in it. And Shane poked himself with a razor blade like he'd been bit and took a Alka-Seltzer, and I pulled that off. And Shane's sitting there shaking, and the fans hollering, "He's been bit! He's been bit!" And Shane's sitting there, and they call the ambulance, and Shane goes to the hospital. Sure did. They thought it was a snake bite. And but Shane and I had some great angles, and and we've done a little bit of everything. You know.
Yeah.
We did one angle over in in Laverne, and those guys over there, Lord have mercy. We were on like third match, and everybody had already bled and went through chairs and and me and Shane sitting there looking at each other. And Shane says, "What are we going to do?" I said, "Let's not do anything." And he said, "Huh?" I said, "Let's not do anything." I said, "We won't touch you. We'll play cat and mouse." And we done that for a couple times. We did it in Columbia, and we did it there, where the whole time limit, we would never touch each other. I'd jump out, "Come out, you scared," and he'd get out, and I'd get in the ring and all that stuff. And I had people slobbering, trying to get a hold of me to try to get me into the ring. And then about the time they'd start to count, Shane would grab me and rear back to hit me, and the bell would ring, and I would slide out. And every time we've done that, the crowd, they had to hold them back to keep from getting to me. You know, you're a chicken, because here I'm so much bigger than Shane, and I'm playing, and man, they're just slobbering. We did it one time over in Columbia, and a guy passed out. He looked at me and he said, "I hate you," and he passed out.
He passed out.
He passed out. He was shaking. He just. I said, "Come on, let's go back to the dressing room."
Yeah, there's nothing else you can do. That's the best.
There's nothing else you can do. Let's go back to the dressing room.
Okay, so I've heard as well that you are a kind of guy that when you get shot into things happen, such as you getting shot into the dressing room and something happened. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. I love UConn.
Yeah.
Probably more than he loves me. But you don't ever fire somebody before they go out for their match. He'd tell me, and I'm a different guy now, and
sure.
I wouldn't do something like that. But me and Shane was working down in Tullahoma, and UConn told me he wasn't going to bring me back. And so I've always been a businessman. I love wrestling, but I also got paid anywhere, and I've spent some nights at home because of that. But I always got paid no matter where I was at. Yeah. And so he didn't want to pay me what I wanted, so he was going to end me up. And so he put me and Shane out there, and I absolutely tore that whole place apart. I tore the railings off the side, and I grabbed Shane, and they had the dressing rooms, and had the particle board on it, and I threw Shane in it, and it hit boom, and I grabbed him. I told Shane, I said, "Reverse it," and Shane threw me, and I hit that thing as hard as I could, put a big hole in it, and you could hear the boys in there, "He's coming through," and they're sitting there holding the wall up. And,
like the Kool-Aid man.
Yeah, I mean, I get that thing everything I could. And
was there something about it? Yeah, go ahead. Was there something about a car maybe that was your own? Yeah, what was it?
It was my car. We started fighting outside, and UConn was coming out. "Oh, stop! And I had my van sitting out there, and I told Shane, I said, "Throw me in that van," and he threw me in it. Boom! And UConn was like, "Oh, stop! That's not the cars, not the cars." But it was my cars. So.
Yeah. Okay, so, we kind of got some stuff there about Shane, and obviously your story can't be told without Shane. Obviously, I consider Shane one of my mentors, but if you had to pick your favorite angle that you worked with Shane, if you had to pick, and I know that's, probably impossible, and maybe you're going to have to pick one that you can remember real quick, but tell me, what would you say your favorite angle working with either the Mortons or Shane specifically? What would you say?
It was definitely the Mortons when we were doing tag teams with Tommy. And, Tommy Higgy, I love Tommy. And Tommy taught me a lot about wrestling.
Yeah.
And when we were doing that angle with him and Boogie or him and Steve, we always had great matches. I remember one, I was up in the Chicago area and Michigan and all up through there for about 7 years. I went up there just about every weekend. And so those guys came down and was watching Southern style wrestling, and we hit Shane with a bottle, and he bled, and they couldn't believe the reaction that we had with the crowd. But I think that whole deal with Boogie and with Shane and me and Tommy, that's probably my favorite angle, and it lasted for years.
Yeah. It's something about that, I tell you. It's so funny how in Nashville, sometimes they got a little, maybe a little burnout. Some people say that, TNA killed Nashville as far as wrestling goes. Byrd for sure said that. But, when it comes down to it, nobody ever got the memo down in Columbia. That wrestling was as much a real thing down there as it ever was anywhere. I think Columbia is such a great wrestling town.
You know what? Because we gave them this. Now I'm gonna jump way back to Lynn Rossi. I used to go once I got trained. Lynn talked to me about wrestling, and he told me, he says, "There's two kinds of BS: BS, and believable BS."
Right.
And he says, if you will put on believable BS, people will come see it. Yeah. He says, if you don't, and now, so we're going to got so far away from anything believable. Like I said earlier, whatever anybody says, they would believe that I was real.
Right.
And,
right.
So, we did that so much, and they believed, because like Shane and Boogie, there's an art to selling. Right. You want to get over as a baby face, sell. You want to pack a house, you have heat. Heat and personal issues will draw. It will draw today, it draws yesterday, it'll draw tomorrow. But you have to have believable BS.
Yeah.
In order for it to work.
Yeah. And, like Ricky Morton, we're talking about Mortons here. Might as well bring up cousin Ricky here. But Ricky is one of those guys, and that's what makes him one of the greatest baby faces of all time, was that believability and how he would just reach to the crowd and say, under his breath almost, help. He would just mouth, help me. And something magical about that,
Hey, Ricky was great. We went up, he and I, we flew out of Nashville one time, went up to, I think it was Wisconsin. All these towns start running together. But that was the funnest trip I've ever been on in my life with somebody. And he and we laughed and had the best time, and we worked the match up there and had a great time. And Ricky Morton is excellent. He's a great guy and probably one of the best sellers ever.
No question.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks, or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Visit USAA.com/bundle.
Bundle savings are off total premium, not available in all states or in all situations. To qualify, auto policy must be active prior to property policy issue, subject to change. Restrictions apply. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
This episode is brought to you by Cadillac. Cadillac certified service technicians are factory trained to fit your vehicle with the tires specifically developed for it. And with our tire price match guarantee, you get the best fit for the best deal. Let us do the work. Available on select eligible tire brands at participating dealers only. Offer ends 12/31/2025. Terms apply. See dealer for complete details. Visit Cadillac.com/service to learn more.
I think you're on mute.
Workday starting to sound the same?
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. Finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
Vitamin Water Zero Sugar has great taste, zero BS, and obviously zero sugar. For those with zero room in their calendar. Zero patience for slow walkers. Those who get 0 hours of sleep on a Saturday night. Have zero filter, zero given, and zero interest in grabbing a plain, boring water. Grab a delicious Vitamin Water Zero Sugar today.
Hey,
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com, and to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
Hi, this is Mike Needham, host of the Reckless Abandon Podcast with Mike Needham. We invite you to jump on your favorite podcast platform and search for the Reckless Abandon Podcast and give us a listen. I'm sometimes joined by a part-time podcaster, part-time co-host, and full-time wife, Tiffany Nicole. We talk wrestling, we talk pop culture, we talk local events, local happenings in West Tennessee, and a ton of other stuff. But be sure to check out the Reckless Abandon Podcast. Find us on Facebook. Also, look up the Microgroup Podcasting family on Facebook and see some of our other podcasts we have out there. Until next time, make good choices, and always remember, no dollar, no dice.
Hey y'all, Jimmy here, and that was episode 4 of the Best of James Rock Street Productions with the first half of episode 38 of Rick Reynolds on Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling. Rick is a great friend and a mentor to me, just like he was to Wolfie D when he was training Wolfie to wrestle back in the day. Whether he was a medic or a devil, or as he is known now as AC Rick, I always appreciate our conversations. You guys can hear the full episode over on @GMBMPW or Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling wherever you listen to podcasts, or simply click the link in the notes below. We hope you have enjoyed this look back in the archives of James Rock Street Productions. Check us out next week to see what else we have in store. Until then, follow @GMBMPW and @JamesRockStreet everywhere. Peace.
With a tear in my eye, this is the greatest moment in my life.
This has been a James Rock Street production.